The topic for today is on MR technique called arterial spin labeling, which has been used very sporadically and off late very extensively in clinical neuroimaging. I would be focusing on the qualitative aspects. I won't go too much into the quantification or any other scientific research oriented methods. This is for routine problem solving in our day-to-day practice. So the highlights for today's talk would cover basically on four main aspects of ASL. We would start off with a bit of introduction and physics, and we will go on to the clinical scenarios. I would quote a few literature evidence. I won't dwell too much on it. I would shift on to the technical limitations and finally end off with just a note on the potential and future progress in this field. Coming to the introduction and physics, any kind of perfusion is basically what is happening at the capillary level. How can we measure the blood flow to an organ of interest and the blood volume that is there? The easiest analogy for us to understand would be like soaking a sponge in water, and how much is the sponge able to hold the water, and that would be the blood volume that is there. So that would be measured in ml per 100 grams of tissues, while the flow rate itself with respect to brain called the cerebral blood flow would be measured in ml per minute per 100 grams. The time taken for it to pass from the arterial to the venous aspect would be the mean transit time. So what are the imaging modalities that we have for assessing the perfusion? The gold standard has always been nuclear medicine using heavy water, oxygen and SPECTs. We started doing a lot of CT based perfusion, which is direct quantification, before shifting to MR based perfusion, which can be a couple of methods using contrast. The commonest and the most standardized format is the T2 star, and also called the dynamic susceptibility based MR perfusion. And the second, not so standardized recent technique is a T1 permeability based techniques. The focus of today's talk would be on the use of a non-contrast method to assess the tissue perfusion called arterial spin labeling. As we can see on the right, why should we even do perfusion? It can be used for vascular things, it can be used for tumors, it can be used for treatment responses, so on and so forth. A direct comparison between the three methods, the dynamic susceptibility weighted contrast is the rapid passage of contrast through the organ of interest, causing either an increase or a decrease. The CT based perfusion is very similar. There is an increase in tissue density based on iodine, and here there is a drop in signal based on the T2 star technique, and they can be used to quantify the perfusion parameters. The DCE method, on the other hand, is a slow permeability based perfusion technique where we inject a bit more slowly and for a prolonged period of time. It focuses mainly on the permeability of the blood-brain barrier and the extravasation that happens. The first method, that is the dynamic susceptibility contrast, assumes that there is no leakage, whereas this actually looks at the leakage. Finally, the arterial spin labeling is a technique where we don't use any exogenous contrast or a tracer. We rather use the blood protons or the water protons within the blood vessels as an endogenous method of tracer. And this is fascinating because it eliminates the need for contrast. There has been a lot of controversies regarding gadolinium and its effects on tissue deposition, especially with respect to repeated MRs. And arterial spin labeling, if standardized in future, could actually solve most of these issues by not having to resort to an exogenous tracer or contrast. What are the parameters usually studied? We look at CBF, the CBV as already seen, the mean transit time. With respect to the permeability based contrast method, which is the dynamic CE, contrast enhanced T1 method, we can also look at something called a K-trans, which is the transfer coefficient between the intravascular and the extravascular tissues, and VE, which is the volume of extracellular space, and VP is the plasma volume. These are additional parameters available through T1 based methods. CBF, CBV and MTT are the standard parameters usually studied. What about ASL? ASL is used to absolute quantification of CBF, which means it doesn't look at blood volume, it only looks at the blood flow. Can we look at mean transit time? Not exactly, but if we can delay the methods or use a multi-delay ASL, about which I'll talk briefly later on, we would be able to quantify something called an arterial arrival time. So how does perfusion parameters work? We have a tracer which can cause either a dip in signal, as like that happens in T2 star. In CT, it will actually cause an increase in signal, and it will be recovered instantaneously as it passes through the area of interest. And as we can see, using this graph, we can look at various parameters, including the CBF, CBV, and the transit times. Since the focus is on ASL, I would skip this part and not go in detail. Looking at ASL, what are the main advantages? Yes, it does use the endogenous tracer. So we label the water protons that are present in the feeding arteries. So what do we mean by labeling? We actually give an inverting or a saturating pulse. Saturation is actually not the correct word, but for easier understanding, we tend to give a 180-degree inverting pulse, which means we invert the magnetization of these labeled water protons. Now, they go on to the area of interest after some time, and that is referred to as a post-labeling delay. So we first label or tag them, we wait for some time, and then we look at the area of interest. Using this and certain formulas, we can use an absolute quantification of CPF. The major advantages are it is repeatable and it uses an endogenous tracer. What are the various techniques available within the ASL are broadly categorized as either a pulse ASL or a pseudo-continuous ASL. So the basic steps, we initially acquire two sets of images. The first set is without any labeling or tagging. The second set is the one with labeling or tag. And since it causes a decrease in signal usually, the labeled image is subtracted from the controlled image, and the resultant subtracted images can be used to produce a perfusion weighted image. So we label or we tag the blood protons proximal to the area of interest in the feeding arteries. We wait for a time that is referred to as a post-labeling delay, and then we acquire the images of the area of interest. So how does it occur? We get a control image and a labeled image, which are then subtracted from each other to produce a perfusion weighted image. Color-coded maps are then derived using computer-based software to derive the CPF maps. In routine clinical practice, we usually don't quantify, or at least the place that we work in, we don't look at quantification. We rather look at qualitative representation and identification of asymmetrical perfusion patterns. What are the basic assumptions we need to have while doing an ASL? We need to assume, one, the entire labeled bolus is delivered to the target tissue. There is no outflow of the labeled blood flow, and the fact that these relaxations are governed by the T1 relaxation rate. The formula is quite complex, but as you can see, it basically depends on delta M, which is the difference in signal between the control images and the labeled images. It also depends on something called a TI, which is the time to invert, as well as a T1 of tissue and the blood invert. What are the main drawbacks? If indeed ASL was so promising, why aren't we seeing it replacing all the contrast-based perfusion? We must first understand that the basic difference in signal between the control and the labeled images are hardly 1 to 2%. And we need to take at least 20 to 40 sets or pairs of such images to get a decent enough SNR. Even then, the spatial resolution and the SNR cannot match up to the other methods. And usually we look at maybe a 3 or 4 mm slice thickness of an anisotropic. These are the first and the main drawback. The second, since we use the saturation or the inverting pulses, it leads to something called an empty effect, which is called a magnetization transfer effect. This is because of the off-resonance effect of these pulses on the protein macromolecules. As we can see, the protein macromolecules have a wide spectrum of frequencies, whereas what we give is a sharp spectrum. But these get affected and they produce a disturbance in the signal, and this is called an empty effect. So we need to have certain modifications in the ASL protocol to account for the empty effect. Second, most importantly, we need to suppress the background signal or the static tissue signal. So these two requirements are seen in every technique of ASL. What about different populations? We cannot have the same transit times for a neonate, a child, or an elderly person. So then the delay times and the durations need to be altered accordingly. Is there a standardization and consensus? We are not fully there. We do have a white paper recommendation of ASL, especially for pseudo-continuous, and I would talk about it later on in this presentation. Coming to the technical factors, grossly we have continuous ASL, which is only of historical importance. Here there is a continuous pulse given at a label at a particular slice. What are the advantages? The signal SNR was actually quite good with continuous ASL, but the RF and the amplifier requirement for giving a continuous pulse is too high and cannot be feasible in the modern day scanners, and it was abandoned. Further, Nowadays, majority of the ASL based techniques are either a pulse form of ASL or a pseudo-continuous ASL. As we can see in this image, the major difference in a pulse is the labeling is done in a slab of tissue instead of a thin slice that happens in the continuous and the so-called pseudo-continuous ASL. So, this thick slab can cover up to 10 to 20 centimeters, and this is used to invert the blood protons. Using various other modifications about which I'll elaborate in the next few slides, the blood protons and the label control pairs are derived to get a CBF image. In a pseudo-continuous form, we combine the advantages of a pulsed and a continuous ASL. We can use a train of short pulses given over a thin slice, and I will talk about why is this advantageous subsequently. We also have a new technique, relatively new and not so much in utilization, something called a velocity selective ASL. So we can encode specific vessels using a velocity threshold. So for example, I give a threshold of 20 centimeter per second. We can only tag those protons in the vessels that go faster than this. So we can look at the individual vessel contribution to various disease pathologies. Like for example in AVM, if there are two vessels supplying AVM nidus, we can look at the selective contribution of each vessel by encoding it separately. Coming to a further elucidation of the techniques, as we already told, pulse ASL uses a thick slab, 10 to 20 centimeters. However, it has a lower SNR and the bolus needs to be sharpened, which means when you invert a thick slab, by the time the protons from the proximal to the distal end of the slab pass on to the area of interest, it becomes ill-defined or less sharp. Quantification becomes difficult. Because of this, we need to have a second saturation pulse, based on which we have certain terminologies called QIPs, QIPs2 or Q2 tips, so that quantification is made possible, as well as sharpen the bolus of the labeled protons. However, pulse ASL has the advantage of having a very high labeling efficiency. What do I mean by labeling efficiency? If I am going to label or try to label 100 protons, how much percentage of protons get labeled? The labeling efficiency of a pulse ASL reaches up to 98%, or 0.98. What are the methods of pulse ASL? The commonly used techniques, the names might be confusing. They are the Epistar, PICOR, or the FAL. How do these differ? They basically differ on how the saturation pulses are applied. If you have a same kind of saturating slab given proximal in the labeled phase, whereas it is given on the inverted or the opposite side of the slab in the control, it's called an epistar. If we have a non-selective saturation placed proximally, it's called a PICOR. FAR is what we use in our setup, where we use a non-selective pulse to invert these. I won't go into the technical details, they're quite confusing, but all we have to understand is these are various forms of pulse ASL, which means thick slab of inversion, and they have a lower SNR in general as compared to pseudo-continuous, but they are offset by an higher labeling efficiencies. Coming to pseudo-continuous, they work on a phenomenon that is called flow-related adiabatic inversion, again quite complex, and I won't really go into in detail. How does pseudo-continuous combine the advantages? It divides the continuous pulse that we saw in CASL into a strain of short pulses, which means it doesn't have the same amplifier requirement, or does it produce same tissue deposition of energy. Second, it has the higher SNR associated with the continuous form of ASL. How about the labeling efficiency? The labeling efficiency of a continuous ASL is lower as compared to a pulse ASL. It is around 80% or 0.8. However, when we convert from continuous to pseudo-continuous, we can actually improve the labeling efficiency by around 18%. Average, it becomes around 0.85. So we can combine the advantages of a pulse ASL as well as a continuous ASL into this method called a pseudo-continuous. Here we invert a thin slab by a short train of RF pulses. As we can see here, the sequence diagram for an ASL, we have a labeling phase or the tagging phase, and then we wait for a time period that is called the post-labeling delay. If it was a pseudo-continuous form, the parameters that you would see in your mission would be the labeling duration, and the PLD or the post-labeling delay. On the other hand, if you have a pulse JSL, since they're all inverted at the same time, you will have a single slice of pulse over a thick slab of tissues, and from that to the image acquisition, we have a time that is called the time to invert. As I told, this leads to a unsharpening of the bolus. To sharpen the bolus and to enable quantification, we had a saturation pulse. And the time between the first pulse and the saturating pulse is then referred to as the TI1. And we can see that the post-labeling delay in a pseudo-continuous ASL would be equivalent to Ti minus Ti1. So this is how the differences work in different scanners, and it can be quite confusing at times. So this is a summary of this. Either we have a thick slab or a thin slice. We invert and label. Usually we keep it just proximal to the area of interest. Is there a recommendation of where should it be kept? The only accepted consensus is try not to keep it in any area where the arteries might be tortuous. Try not to keep it in areas which might have susceptibility artifacts like a dental filling or a metallic thing. And preferably, we also need to look at the age of the patient because that determines your post-labeling delay. We also have certain recommendations like ACPC line. We take 8.5 centimeters below it, just below the cerebellum, but these are all not standardized. What should be the post-labeling delay? As we can see, it varies between 1500 to 2000. What is the trade-off that is here? All these depend on the T1 relaxation of blood, and it cannot be more than that because it will then lead to a decay of signal. So how do we vary this? It depends on the circulation times. We know that a healthy adult, the circulation time is quite robust, and that is fixed at around 1800 milliseconds. As the age increases or in the presence of diseases, we increase the labeling delays to around 2000 milliseconds. Children, on the other hand, have hyperdynamic circulations. You can reduce it to 1500, keeping in mind that neonates actually need again an increase in post-labeling delay. The various recommendations with respect to spatial resolution around 3 to 4 mm, the readout that is used, which means do we want a 2-dimensional readout or a 3-dimensional readout? A 3D readout is preferred. Do you want a spin echo or a gradient echo? Often they use a combination of it called GRACE or a RAR. The rest might be quite complex for the physics part of it, and I will skip for want of time. So the direct comparison, initially we started off with continuous, became historical significant. Pulse ASL started coming because of its higher labeling efficiency. Later we could combine the advantages of a continuous and a pulse by using a pseudo-continuous method. It has 50% more SNR as compared to a continuous with an increased label efficiency of around 18%. Ultimately, what should be done would depend on the institutional preferences and the local logistics. Again, a comparative table, as we can see here. This is just to reinforce the points earlier told. The labeling efficiency is maximum for a pulse ASL. With respect to continuous and pseudo-continuous has an increased efficiency. SNR is maximum for continuous and pseudo-continuous as compared to a pulse ASL. So we can see the trade-off here. Pseudo-continuous combines the best of both. What do we prefer in terms of scanner strength? 3 Tesla is always preferred. It gives us more SNR. It also gives us a longer T1. What do we use? It can vary between pseudo-continuous, pulse. Continuous is no longer used. Crusher gradients are used to make sure vessel signal apart from the area of interest, venous signals, etc., contralateral flow coming from opposite sides. If you have looking at craniocaudal, we don't want caudocranial flow to be assessed. Then we use crusher gradients. Do we use a readout, 3D or 2D? 3D is preferred. What should be the TE? As in other things, as short as possible. What should be the TR? We just make sure that the label protons tend to get relaxed as much as possible between the acquisitions. What should be the TI or the PLD? It's usually around 1800, varies between 1500 to 2000 as we just saw. What should be the labeling duration? As we know, the pulse ASL ensures a thick slab, which means we can afford a smaller labeling duration. A pseudo-continuous is a thin slice, needs to be continuously applied for a longer time. What are the parameters that we use here in our place? We have both a 1.5 and a 3T mission. The 3D machine employs a pulsed ASL using a FAR sequence, and we use a turbo gradient spin echo and a 3D segmented readout. The 1.5 Tesla uses a pseudo-continuous form of ASL. We use a labeling distance around 95 millimeters with a delay of around 1800. Certain advanced labeling schemes are available, as of yet not used in routine practice. So is the vessel selector. We can see that ASL has advantages in patients with renal insufficiencies, for follow-up patients, pediatric age group, as well as identifying perfusion patterns without a contrast. It has no radiation, no exogenous contrast, can help in observed quantification, especially CBF. If we can vary the labeling duration from a single labeling delay to a multiple delay, we can calculate the transit time. We can have it to use for follow-ups, repeated measurements, and reproducible.